And the Oscar goes to Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven.
Picture this.
Picture this scene from 1993 in Beverly Hills. The Four Seasons hotel lobby was packed with important people from the movie business. Producers wore expensive Armani suits, and Oscar winners sat around drinking whiskey. Near the grand piano, Clint Eastwood stood by himself, looking serious with his arms crossed. Across the room, a young actor who was becoming famous was entertaining a group of people. He was laughing, dropping names, and telling stories. His story ended with him making fun of the old cowboy director in a cheap imitation. Everyone around him laughed except for Clint. He didn't say anything at all. He just finished his drink, nodded to the bartender, and walked out the door without looking back. There was no argument or big scene, just silence. But it was the kind of silence that meant something final had happened. For years after that night, people whispered about what happened. They wondered what was said, what Clint heard, and why that actor's name stopped appearing on Warner Brothers' casting lists soon after. Nobody ever found out the real story because Clint Eastwood didn't explain himself. He didn't get angry in public, post on social media, or give quotes to tabloid magazines. He just quietly and permanently made people disappear from his world. Now at 94 years old, the legendary actor and director is finally opening up a bit. In some rare, honest moments, a clear pattern has appeared. There are 5 names, 5 celebrities that Clint Eastwood never forgave. These were people who insulted him, showed no respect for his work, or made the serious mistake of thinking he would forget what they did. They didn't just have disagreements with a filmmaker. They crossed a man who lived by a strict code and never backed down from his principles. The first person on this list is a documentary maker who tried to become famous by mocking Clint's beliefs. Clint didn't laugh it off or respond publicly. He just made sure it never happened again. Michael Moore was known for making controversial documentaries. The trouble between him and Clint started with what Moore thought was just a joke. In 2005, during a National Board of Review Awards event, Clint Eastwood was on stage and made a comment that stopped all the laughter in the room. He said that he and Michael Moore actually had something in common because they both liked documentaries. But then he added that if Moore ever showed up at his front door with a camera, he would kill him. The audience didn't know how to react. Some people laughed nervously while others gasped. Clint didn't smile or try to make it seem like he was just kidding. The uncomfortable feeling in the room was thick like smoke. This wasn't comedy. This was Clint drawing a clear line that Moore should never cross, and Moore never did. The bad feelings between these two men went much deeper than just one comment. Moore had been getting a lot of attention with his documentary called Fahrenheit 9/11. This film was a harsh attack on the Bush administration and American military actions after September 11th. It won awards and made headlines, but it made Clint very angry. Eastwood had grown up respecting World War II heroes and believing in quiet service to country. To him, Moore's work felt like a cheap attack wrapped up in self-promotion. Clint didn't see it as fair criticism. He saw it as betrayal. And this hit him personally because by then, Clint wasn't just an actor anymore. He had become a respected director and storyteller. He had just finished $1 Million Baby and was about to release Flags of Our Fathers. His films explored what it meant to be American, talked about sacrifice and pain, not to get attention, but to preserve history. In Clint's view, Michael Moore wasn't documenting the truth. He was using it to make himself famous. The two men never worked together after that, never even appeared in the same photograph again. If you asked Clint about Moore today, he would probably just raise an eyebrow, make a quiet grunt, and change the subject. Eastwood doesn't believe in having public fights. He believes in quietly removing people from his life. But Moore wasn't the only filmmaker who tested Clint's patience. The next person went even further by accusing Clint of changing history on a world stage. This time, Clint Eastwood didn't just ignore it. He fought back. Clint Eastwood rarely argues with people publicly, but in 2008 he made an exception, and it wasn't pleasant. When his movies, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, came out in theaters, critics praised Eastwood's ambitious project. He had made 2 films about the same battle, one from the American point of view and one from the Japanese perspective. The movies were raw, grim, and honest. But Spike Lee saw something major missing from the story. Lee publicly accused Clint of erasing black Marines from the story of Iwo Jima. He criticized the lack of representation in Flags of Our Fathers, saying that many African Americans had given their lives in that battle, and you couldn't ignore that fact. Clint was furious. He didn't respond with careful diplomatic language. Instead, he fired back with something that sounded like a threat from an old Western movie. He said that a guy like Spike Lee should shut his face. This wasn't just defensive. It was explosive. The entertainment news went crazy with headlines about the fight. Spike didn't back down either. He said he wasn't going to shut up and that Clint sounded like an angry old man. For days, the feud took over entertainment news. Two great filmmakers were in a war of words that showed Hollywood's biggest problems with race and representation. Many people tried to help them work it out or explain what each side meant, but Clint never clarified his harsh words. That silence said everything. To Eastwood, the story of Iwo Jima was about a specific group of soldiers. He wasn't interested in including people just to check boxes. He was interested in telling his story the way he saw it, and he wasn't going to let anyone tell him how to make his art. But Spike saw it completely differently. He believed Clint had a responsibility to tell the full story of history, especially when lives were lost and forgotten. It wasn't just about a movie. It was about the importance of representing all the people who had sacrificed. For two men as proud, principled, and stubborn as Eastwood and Lee, there was no way to compromise. They haven't spoken to each other since that fight. They don't go to the same events. They don't appear on the same discussion panels, and neither has publicly acknowledged the other's work or legacy, at least not where anyone can hear it. If you thought Clint only had problems with fellow directors, think again. His next conflict happened on his own movie set with one of the most famous actors in the world. This actor tried to test Clint's patience and lost badly. Leonardo DiCaprio and Clint Eastwood were two icons from completely different eras. DiCaprio was known as an intense, emotionally charged method actor who liked to dig deep into his characters. Clint Eastwood was the tough, no-nonsense filmmaker who valued speed, silence, and control on his sets. When Eastwood chose DiCaprio for his 2011 movie J. Edgar, Hollywood was excited. It seemed like the perfect meeting of old-school and new-school filmmaking. But behind the scenes, that meeting turned into a quiet storm. From the very first day, there was obvious tension. Clint was famous for his one-take directing style. He liked minimal rehearsal, simple setup, shoot the scene, and move on to the next one. It was efficient, it relied on instinct, and it was the complete opposite of how DiCaprio liked to work. Leo enjoyed exploring his character. He wanted to do multiple takes of each scene. He asked lots of questions and tried to dive into the emotional layers of every moment. While DiCaprio was searching for subtle details in his performance, Clint was already calling, "Cut, move on." People who worked on the movie whispered about the tension between them. One person who was there said it was like watching a racehorse try to run while wearing cowboy boots. There were no screaming matches or dramatic walkouts, but everyone could feel the uncomfortable energy on set. Here were two master craftsmen with completely different approaches, locked in a silent struggle over how a story should be told. DiCaprio did his best to adapt to Clint's style, but Clint refused to change his methods. The movie got made and was released, and then there was silence. No second collaboration ever happened. There were no warm compliments in interviews, and no supportive comments during awards season. Clint, who often works again with actors he admires like Morgan Freeman and Bradley Cooper, never called Leo for another project. Some people say it was just creative incompatibility, two different working styles that didn't mesh well. Others believe Clint saw DiCaprio as high maintenance, too theatrical, maybe even egotistical. Whatever the real reason, their professional paths split apart like a cracked mirror, and Eastwood never looked back. While DiCaprio may have challenged Clint's control behind the camera, the next name on the list did something far worse. He mocked Eastwood's legacy in front of the entire world and thought he got away with it. He was wrong. Some actors make quiet enemies, but Seth Rogen made his very loudly. In 2014, Clint Eastwood released American Sniper, a biographical war drama about Navy SEAL Chris Kyle. The film divided critics but broke box office records and started a huge cultural debate. For many people, it was a tribute to military service and sacrifice. For Rogen, it was something entirely different. Just days after the movie was released, Rogan posted something on Twitter that shocked people. He wrote that American Sniper reminded him of the movie that was showing in the third act of Inglourious Bastards, the one where the Nazi sniper was killing Allied soldiers. He didn't mention Clint by name, but he didn't have to. The implication was like a nuclear bomb. He was comparing Eastwood's film to Nazi propaganda. Even though Rogan insisted later that it was just a joke, the damage was already done. Clint Eastwood didn't respond on Twitter. He didn't issue a public statement. He didn't say a single word because Clint doesn't fight battles on social media. He responds with ice-cold silence. Behind closed doors, people who knew Eastwood said he was furious. He wasn't just angry because of the insult itself, but because it was made publicly on social media. It wasn't a debate or discussion. It was a hit-and-run attack. To Clint, it wasn't just disrespectful, it was cowardly. While Rogan would later try to take back his comment, saying he wasn't really calling American Sniper Nazi propaganda, the apology never reached Clint's ears or his heart. Eastwood never mentioned Rogan again, never worked with him, and reportedly made it clear to his close collaborators that if Rogan's name ever appeared on a casting list, it had better disappear quickly. Because if there's one thing Clint Eastwood doesn't tolerate, it's being disrespected by someone who, too, thinks everything is a joke. But this final name on the list wasn't a comedian or someone making political statements. He was Clint's equal, his peer, his co-star, and their conflict simmered in complete silence until one unforgettable film nearly brought it all into the open. On screen, Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman were electric together. Off-screen, they barely spoke to each other. In 1992, these two giants joined forces for Unforgiven, a film that changed how people thought about Western movies and won multiple Oscars. It looked like a perfect collaboration between two legends, but behind their strong performances was a slow-burning storm. Clint was known for running a tight, respectful movie set. He valued control, quiet efficiency, and trust between everyone working on the film. Hackman was unpredictable, fiery, and famous for being combative and difficult to work with. While Eastwood gave his actors freedom to interpret their roles, he expected discipline and professionalism. Hackman brought intensity, but sometimes too much of it. From the very first week of filming, there were whispers of trouble between them. Hackman didn't take direction easily. He would interrupt Clint's instructions, challenge the way scenes were blocked out, and push for changes to the script's dialogue. It wasn't rebellion exactly, but it was pride clashing with pride. One assistant working on the film remembered a moment during an important scene where Hackman stopped in the middle of a take, turned to Clint, and said that a particular line didn't work and he wasn't going to say it. Clint didn't argue or get into a discussion. He simply stared at Hackman, and then with a soft but deadly serious tone, replied that, yes, he would say it. It wasn't yelling or screaming, but everyone knew it was final. Tension hung over the rest of the filming like a storm cloud in the desert. They never argued in front of the crew, but their silences spoke louder than words ever could. There was mutual respect between them as professionals, sure, but there was no trace of mutual affection or friendship. After Unforgiven was finished, both men walked away with gold Oscar statues, but that was the last time they ever worked on the same movie set. Clint never invited Hackman back for another project, never mentioned him as a favorite collaborator, and when asked about the film years later, he would talk about Morgan Freeman or Richard Harris, but rarely, if ever, about Hackman. People in the movie industry believed the professional respect between them was real, but the personal relationship was beyond repair. There had been too much ego, too much friction, and in Clint's world, that means only one thing: one project together and then it's done forever. Hackman would retire from acting not long after, while Eastwood continued making movies, carefully choosing who he brought into his inner circle. For Clint Eastwood, chemistry between collaborators isn't about how famous they are. It's about trust, and once that's broken, even by a fellow legend, it's over. Two icons made one unforgettable film together, and then built a wall of silence between them that never cracked. Because when Clint Eastwood closes a door on someone, it stays shut permanently. This is the story of Clint Eastwood's approach to conflict and relationships in Hollywood. He never needed to shout or make dramatic public statements. He didn't throw tantrums or share private conflicts in interviews with magazines. He just watched, waited, and when someone crossed his personal line, he didn't fight back publicly. Instead, he cut them out of his life quietly and permanently. In Hollywood, Where reputations are usually built on charm and the ability to work well with others, Clint built his legacy on something completely different: unwavering conviction and sticking to his principles no matter what. These five celebrities learned the hard way that working with Eastwood wasn't just another job. It was a test of respect, discipline, and knowing when to keep your ego under control. Some of them failed that test in spectacular fashion. Clint Eastwood's way of handling conflict shows us something important about his character. He doesn't believe in public feuds or dramatic confrontations. He believes in maintaining his standards and quietly removing people who don't meet them from his professional and personal life. Whether you agree with his methods or not, there's no denying that this approach has served him well throughout his long and successful career in Hollywood.